So we're towards the end of 2025 and yeah, I mean, this year for the most part has been a pretty average year for video game releases. I would say it was about the same as 2024 but slightly different, maybe slightly better in some ways, but I don't know, it depends on who you ask. We saw the release of major games like Mario Kart World, Donkey Kong Bonanza, Pokemon C through A. Um, we saw Metroid Prime 4 Beyond. We had Battlefield 6, which people love, Black Ops 7, which people hated. We had the Ark game. We had Doom the Dark Ages, which, even though it's a good game, no one's really talking about it anymore. We had Fatal Fury's City of the Wolves, which solid game, but flopped in terms of sales. A lot of games came out this year, and the Game Awards had named Expedition 33 Clear Obscure as the best video game of the year. It's an RPG that I don't hear too many people talk about, but I don't know. I guess it's one of those games that people would go on record and say is better than Final Fantasy 16, even though it obviously drew inspiration from Final Fantasy and Persona and all that other stuff. And yeah, I mean, you look at like the reason as to why Expedition 33 had won Game of the Year. Some people feel like it was the Game Awards way of pretty much sticking it to giant corporations like Nintendo and Activision because they have like these highly profitable IPs, and they pretty much do what they want when it comes down to like gameplay and like it's like a lot of big corporations don't care about fan service so much, and they'll always do at least one thing to piss off a majority of their fan base or their consumers to a point where it leads to boycotts and it leads to a lot of controversy. And the same can be said with Nintendo because over the past couple of years, Nintendo's been involved in so many different things that's created controversy. You look at the whole thing regarding them trying to they're trying to prevent pirating, and they're trying to shut down emulation sites and all that stuff. And it drew the ire of a lot of online gamers. And then you look at Mario Kart World, it was a pretty good game. And I think it was one of those titles that people had like really high expectations for. And maybe it kind of fell below their expectations just a little bit. But I do feel like the open world, um, roaming mode in that game is something that definitely helped it a lot in terms of like overall quality. Um, Making the Grand Prix more challenging and adding like new character models and stages and all that stuff is cool. The online gameplay modes were good as well until I guess they made that update, and that's something that pissed a lot of people off. And they said, you know what, this game sucks, whatever, we're boycotting it, what have you. And aside from that, I mean, like, Mario Kart World actually did pretty well in terms of sales because the game has been out since, I want to say it's been out since summer. And since then, it's sold at least 9.5 million copies worldwide. So that's actually pretty good. And you look at Pokemon C through a lot of people were boycotting that as well. And since its release, not too long ago, it did like 5.8 million in terms of sales. And then you have Donkey Kong Bonanza, which did more than 3.4 million copies in terms of sales. So I think it's safe to say that the Nintendo boycott, for the most part, I guess it seems like it's a failure because their more profitable IPs are still, appealing to casuals, mainly children. And I think that's the good thing about like Nintendo and what they're doing is the fact that it appeals more to children. So, adult fans and like, people who are like fans of the older like Nintendo games and stuff like that, when they see this and they get upset and they rant about it online, I don't think it's something that's going to affect the overall sales of the games or anything like that because a lot of Nintendo's games, it targets like a smaller, not a smaller audience, but like, it targets like children for the most part. And, children just want to have fun. Parents just buy what, they see in stores that their kids want. And, and a lot of people felt like, the pricing of the video games was something that was going to be one of the reasons why Nintendo was going to end up suffering financially. Because the other day I was in the store and I looked at Mario Kart World. The game is priced around $80, but that's because the cost of gaming in general is going up. And the thing is, Mario Kart World, along with the Switch 2, is still relatively new. The Switch 2 has managed to sell over 10 million units ever since it was released this past summer. And the last time I checked, the price was around like 400 and like $50 for the Switch 2, which isn't too bad. But considering the fact that the Switch 2, gives you like PS4 like quality gameplay and graphics, it does seem like kind of a rip off to some people's eyes, considering the fact that we got the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Series X, which, mind you, both are more expensive than the Switch 2, but obviously you get better quality. You get like Blu-ray tracing on one of the consoles. You get 4K graphics, stuff like that that you don't get in the Switch 2. We probably won't get like 4K graphics from any Nintendo console until like the Switch 3 comes out. But I digress. Yeah, the I wouldn't say like the Nintendo boycott is something that was a complete failure. I mean, obviously, like a lot of like it seemed like a lot of people are pretty much putting indie games over like, games like Mario and Donkey Kong and, like, Final Fantasy, anything that's like high profile. Because I don't know, we're in a time where I guess people want to see new things opposed to just seeing new entries of older IPs all the time. But the thing is, the older IPs tend to, sell more than some of the newer stuff. Because I don't even know what like the sales figures for Expedition 33 is. And and I think Metaphor ran Fantasio from last year. That ended up being best video game of the year, but I don't think it was really a massive sales success. At least, I can't remember off the top of my head whether or not it was. But I don't know. I feel like this is a trend that's probably going to continue for the rest of the decade, where the best video game of the year is going to end up being like an indie game that's a good game on paper in terms of graphics and features and immersion and stuff like that. But it's something that doesn't really get a lot of buzz or mainstream attention or anything like that. But then again, 2026 could be an exception because GTA 6 is supposed to be coming out next year, unless Rockstar decides to push that back again. And if that's the case, they might as well just cancel the game because people are sick of waiting. And I feel like, Metroid Prime 4 Beyond is something that kind of, it's suffered because, for the most part, Nintendo decided to constantly push back the release date for that game as well. Because I believe Metroid Prime 4 just came out and it tanked in terms of first week sales. Because I think it sold, like, it didn't even sell a quarter of a million units within its first week. I think it sold like roughly over 21,000 units in Japan. So the fact that that game tanked in Japan is, it's, I mean, on one hand, it doesn't really surprise me too much, but on the other hand, Metroid is one of Nintendo's oldest IPs, and you know we're getting close to Christmas, so it's quite possible that sales for that particular game could pick up. But then again, you look at Samus Aran, the main character of Metroid. Obviously, she's not nearly as popular as some of the other Nintendo characters like Nintendo or Link or Zelda or Donkey Kong. There's so many there are so many like different characters and in Nintendo and different IPs that have been consistently popular over the years. And you look at, Metroid, Prime and all that. Like the last Metroid Prime game we got was back in 2007, and even though we got Metroid Dread like in 2021 or whatever, it just feels like Nintendo hasn't really been consistent with Metroid games. And I feel like that's something that kind of hurt, Metroid Prime 4 because people had extremely high expectations. And by the time the game came out, people just like, I guess it fell below their expectations, or maybe, I don't know, they just got sick of waiting and they just didn't care anymore. And it's something that hurt the sales of the game. But but yeah, like the crazy thing about like Metroid Prime 4 is the fact that Octopath Traveler Zero, which recently came out, actually sold more than Metroid Prime 4 did during its first week. Because last time I checked, that game sold over 59,000 units within its first week. So, yeah, I mean, I don't know if that's really a good sign for the Metroid series, and if the sales for Metroid Prime 4 don't pick up, then this will basically end up being the lowest selling Metroid game in recent memory. So, I don't know. Yeah, like Nintendo for the most part, they're still profiting off of their games and all that stuff, despite how expensive they are, and despite all the controversies that they've been involved in within the past couple of years. And the thing is, we still have like more Nintendo games that a lot of people are waiting to see within the next couple of years. Like at some point, we're most likely going to get another Smash Brothers game. At some point, we're going to get another main Super Mario Brothers entry. At some point, we're going to get another um, Zelda 3D game that's canon. And I'm not talking about like right now, like it's too soon because Tears of the Kingdom came out back in like 2023. So that might possibly take a while. We're still waiting for Luigi's Mansion 4. So there's a lot of money to be made on the Switch too with like new games or sequel to older games. And I honestly feel like like for diehard Nintendo fans, like the pricing is something that's not going to stop them. It's just that they won't be able to pirate those games or anything like that. But the thing is, it's really going to increase the pressure for Nintendo to like deliver on those games, because if they're going to be really like picky and snippy about emulation and piracy and stuff like that, then they have to deliver. Their video games have to be hits and not misses. They have to be home runs from here on out.